Once upon a time, there was a small town nestled deep in the woods. The townspeople were known for their superstitions and their fear of the unknown. They believed that there was something lurking in the shadows, watching their every move, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. One night, a group of teenagers decided to explore the abandoned mansion at the edge of town. The mansion had been abandoned for years, and the locals believed that it was haunted by the spirits of the previous owners. As the group of teenagers entered the mansion, they could feel an eerie chill in the air. The floorboards creaked beneath their feet, and the windows rattled as the wind howled outside. As they made their way through the dark and dusty hallways, they began to hear strange noises. Footsteps echoing in the distance, doors creaking open and slamming shut, and whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. Suddenly, one of the teenagers screamed, and the others rushed to see what had happened. They found their friend lying on the ground, his eyes wide open in terror, but he was no longer breathing. Panicked, the remaining teenagers tried to find their way out of the mansion. But the doors and windows seemed to have all been locked from the outside. They were trapped inside with no way to escape, and then, they began to hear a low growling sound, like an animal preparing to attack. In the darkness, they saw a shadowy figure slowly approaching them. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and its breath was hot and foul. As it drew closer, the teenagers could see that it was a creature unlike any they had ever seen before. It had razor-sharp teeth and claws, and its skin was slick with blood. With no weapons to defend themselves, the teenagers ran in all directions, hoping to evade the creature. But it seemed to be everywhere, always one step ahead of them. One by one, the teenagers fell to the monster's claws until only one was left. Once upon a time, there was a small village on the outskirts of a dense forest. The villagers lived a simple life, but they had always known that the forest was home to something sinister. They would often hear strange noises and see eerie shadows moving in the darkness. One night, a group of children decided to sneak into the forest to explore. As they ventured deeper into the woods, they began to feel a sense of unease. The trees seemed to grow closer together, and the darkness seemed to swallow them up. Suddenly, one of the children screamed. The others rushed to her side, and they saw that she was being dragged away by an unseen force. They tried to hold on to her, but her body was being pulled away too strongly. They had no choice but to let her go, and they could hear her screams as she was dragged deeper into the forest. The other children were terrified and ran back to the village to tell their parents what had happened. The villagers immediately organized a search party and went into the forest to find the missing child. But they found nothing, except for a strange symbol etched into a tree. The villagers were mystified by the symbol, and no one knew what it meant. But as the days passed, more and more children began to disappear. The villagers became increasingly panicked, and they begged the local shaman to help them. The shaman explained that the symbol was a warning. It was a sign that the forest was cursed and that something evil was living there. The shaman warned that if the villagers did not appease the spirit of the forest, they would continue to lose their children. The villagers were desperate, and they decided to offer a sacrifice to the spirit of the forest. They chose the bravest and strongest man in the village, hoping that his sacrifice would be enough to appease the spirit and bring their children back. The man went into the forest, armed with only a knife. He was determined to face whatever evil lurked there and save the children. But he never returned, and the villagers never saw their children again. To this day, the village is abandoned, and the forest remains cursed. The symbol on the tree serves as a warning to all who would venture into the woods, that there is something dark and sinister lurking there, waiting for its next victim. There was an old, abandoned house on the outskirts of town that everyone avoided. The rumors were that it was haunted by the ghost of a woman who had been murdered there many years ago. One night, a group of friends dared each other to spend the night in the house. As they explored, they heard strange noises and saw ghostly figures moving through the halls. The friends were terrified, and they tried to leave, but the door was locked. They were trapped inside with the ghostly presence, and they knew they might not make it out alive. As the night went on, the ghostly presence became more and more intense. The friends saw the ghostly figure of a woman in a white dress, who seemed to be searching for something. They tried to communicate with her, but she was unresponsive. Finally, the sun began to rise, and the ghostly presence disappeared. The friends were shaken but relieved to have survived the night. They knew they would never forget the haunted house and the ghostly figure that haunted it. The Devil's Pact. A man was desperate to become wealthy and successful, and he made a deal with the devil. The devil promised to give the man everything he wanted, but in exchange, the man had to give up his soul. The man agreed, and soon, he became incredibly wealthy and powerful. But as time went on, he realized that the devil's gift came with a terrible price. The man's life became consumed with greed and selfishness. He lost all of his friends and family, and he became paranoid and reclusive. He was plagued by visions of the devil, who taunted him and reminded him of the pact he had made. The man knew he had made a terrible mistake, but he was too afraid to break the pact. Finally, the devil came to collect the man's soul. The man begged for mercy, but the devil was merciless. The man was dragged to hell, where he was tormented for eternity. His wealth and power meant nothing in the face of the devil's wrath. The house on Willow Lane, once a beautiful home, the house on Willow Lane had been abandoned for decades. The town whispered about the strange occurrences that happened there. Strange sounds, flickering lights, and voices were heard coming from the house. Many believed it to be haunted, while others simply thought it was the product of an overactive imagination. But one day, a young family moved into the house. They were excited to fix it up and make it their home. They painted the walls, replaced the windows, and even bought new furniture. For a while, everything seemed perfect, but then strange things started to happen. One night, the family was awakened by a loud crash. When they went to investigate, they found their living room in shambles. Furniture was overturned, pictures were smashed, and books were scattered all over the floor. They tried to explain it away as a freak accident, but they knew it was something more sinister. The family began to hear voices and footsteps in the middle of the night. They heard whispers and murmurs coming from the walls. The children started to have nightmares, and the parents began to feel like they were being watched. Finally, the family decided they had to leave. They packed up their things and left the house on Willow Lane. But as they drove away, they saw a figure standing in the window, watching them leave. They never went back to the house, but they knew the figure was still there, waiting for its next victim. Years later, the house on Willow Lane still stands, abandoned and foreboding. People still whisper about the strange occurrences that happened there. Some say the house is cursed, while others say it's haunted by the ghosts of the family that once lived there. But one thing is certain, no one wants to go near the house on Willow Lane after dark.